So as you guys may or may not have seen, they made a couple edits, couple updates to our agency agreements. Again, this is all part of that NAR settlement. I will say the good news is they said they don't expect any more changes until July, which is when the forms update anyway. So we should be good at least for a couple months. We got these new forms from .loop this morning. So they are now in our template. So if you're creating a new template this morning going forward, you will have the new forms in there. If you have an existing agency agreement in a loop, you do not have to replace it. You can use what you have. However, and this is what I need everybody to hear, many of you have loops created, but you don't have an existing agency agreement yet. And I understand you're doing the research, you're getting it together, but you don't have that agency agreement signed. So if you have a loop created, but you don't have an executed agency agreement, you're going to have to add the new forms. I need you to go out to NCAR, search, add a document, templates, NCAR forms, and add the new one. Is everybody good with that? Always make sure you're using the current. The biggest changes, let me go ahead and share my screen. The biggest changes are to the exclusive right to sell. And that's the one we're going to spend most of our time on. There were a few changes to the buyer's agency agreement as well, but not as major because, as you guys know, we had those big changes just, 2 months ago. So I can't see you guys right now. I just see my exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Can somebody tell me that's what you see as well?
I see it.
Perfect. Thank you. So first off, big change. The exclusive right to sell listing agreement was 13 pages, and now it is 7. So our agency agreements are getting smaller and smaller. I will say part of it, there's things that were in the former exclusive right to sell listing agreement that they have taken away from the listing agreement and added to the guidelines. So, for example, you might remember the old listing agreement. There was a whole note section about what happens if you're dealing with an estate, things like that. And the end of the day, it was all call your attorney. So all that has been moved to the guidelines. Right now, they have interim guidelines. They'll have the formal guidelines in July when they update the forms anyway. So a couple changes here, not really changes. Most of any of the changes were NAR settlement related, but a lot of what they did to the listing agreement was just consolidate. So it starts with services provided. This whole paragraph is new. And again, it's just all consolidated. So we can easily better tell the seller what services we're going to offer, excuse me. So it goes through those specific services, and then we get into, marketing, et cetera, that kind of thing below. Of course, we still have the term of the agreement, as always. The thing that they highlighted here was make sure that you have an expiration date in your listing agreement. You cannot have an open-ended listing agreement. The property section, you guys feel free to stop me at any time with questions too, please. The property section has been consolidated a lot. So now instead of it being spaced out, we have that information here. Again, the content hasn't changed. They just consolidated, made it smaller. The biggest thing is they now have a section for additional parcels. So if additional parcels are part of this agreement, then they're described in an attached exhibit. So you have a seller that's selling multiple properties or pieces, parcels, and you can put it all on that exhibit. We can expect to see this additional parcels piece added to our sales contract, to 2T, when that comes out in July. So they just went ahead and got the listing agreement updated. Then they consolidated the fixtures. The fixture list has not changed. It's still the same as it has been. The only thing they said about fixtures is they're having cases where agents are feeling the need to go through and cross out things that don't apply to this property. So they reaffirmed us that we don't need to do that. It's not saying if it's here, it needs to be added. What it says is all the items below existing on the property and all existing fixtures will be included. So don't feel like you need to go through with your pen and cross out things that are not there. The other thing here, again, just kind of consolidated. They're still talking about unpairing smart features of the phone, items leased and not owned, things that we should be talking about to the seller. They kind of lump personal property in under here as well. Again, anything that the seller might be willing to leave. Of course, all that is negotiable, the fixtures and the personal property. Don't forget, July, we got a new form. It's form number 320, and it's an outside bill of sale. So if on the sales contract, this personal property list starts adding up quickly, then you may want to consider that outside bill of sale, form 320, to keep it out of the real property contract. Listing price, nothing changed there. Marketing, a lot of this has just been consolidated. You can see this section used to be what, 2 pages, something like that, page and a half. And now they just have it spelled out here. So same idea. We're going to do public marketing or office exclusive. It's a one or the other. Remembering that office exclusives is marketing. You're just not marketing it to the public. So if it's office exclusive, it's just staying in-house. Number 7, this is the big change. If you've been dazing off, this is the time to, to pick up and listen. So with number 7 goes over our fees and costs. And again, this is all settlement change related. So 7A says negotiable fees. Seller understands that the amount, format, or rate of real estate compensation is not fixed by law, but is set by each broker or firm individually and is fully negotiable. B is the firm's fee, and it is the firm's fee only. B is what we expect to collect when we sell your house, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. So we have a non-refundable retainer fee, which mirrors what we see in the buyer's agency agreement, a percentage of the gross sales of the property, a flat fee, or another fee. For example, like if you're charging the seller the transaction fee or something like that, you could put that in here.
Jules, let's make sure and reiterate that everybody understands that is what you are getting paid to list and market the house.
Everybody hear that?
Yes.
Yes, I was muted. Yes.
Okay. So B is just what Blue Door Group expects to collect when we sell your house. C is what we're going to share with, if we are going to share with a buyer's agent. So the firm is authorizing to offer a percentage or a flat fee to a seller subagent or a buyer's agent. Seller may offer a percentage or a flat fee. If so, then we have standard form 220, which all of you have been really good about using. So just making sure that, yeah.
I got a question.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to be separating them now. So we're not going to put the total amount for the firm or we are still doing that if the firm's going to give, say the seller agrees, 2% or whatever to the buyer and, the whatever 2% to the firm. We put that total under that and then separate it, or do we separate?
So B is the firm's fee. C is anything that we expect to share, if anything, with the buyer's agent. And then D is the total.
Oh, okay. So we're splitting it up. Okay. Self-explanatory.
So they used to do the total at top and then say, how much do you want to share with the buyer's agent?
Okay.
And now they're separating the whole thing. This is what, let me put it up here so we can see it all. This is what the firm expects to collect. This is what, if anything, that we're going to share with the buyer. And then D is the total, the firm's fee plus the cooperative compensation.
Okay. Thank you.
I can just say something real quick.
Please.
I'm one of those people that has to hear what I'm saying. So for confirmation for me, in short, A, for an example, A, firm fee, 3%. C, buyer's fee, 3%. D, 6%.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's not a major change, but it is a change. And we need to make sure, if we want to get paid, we want to make sure that we're filling this piece out properly. What other thoughts or questions do we have on that?
Guys, I think really the notion why they did this and separated it out is because assuming you are going through this document with sellers, they just want the sellers to see in black and white that there is a clear separation between the two fees and that they do have the option to negotiate that fee on both sides.
The other thing they mentioned as a reminder, and I know this is happening and it makes me nervous because I think it's going to come to a head one day, but we are supposed to have all of our commission agreed on and negotiated in the agency agreements before we present the offer. Commission doesn't belong in the sales contract. And I know that's happening. And I really do think it's just a matter of time before that comes to a head. So
What about the 220 though?
220 absolutely is where
They
we're
can
going to,
use the 220.
absolutely. So if you need to, you know, at the time of offer or whatever, and you're negotiating commission, then you have 220, you know, agency agreement and addendum 710, but just don't put it in 2T.
Yeah, guys, I will tell you, I'm seeing more and more, and I don't disagree with this. That more and more agents are sending the 220 over with their offer. They're not calling me ahead of time asking. They're just sending over the 220 with what they want. And then it becomes a negotiable item. And I'm actually okay with that. I would just as soon it be a negotiable item.
But it's in 220, not 2T.
That's correct.
That's
It's
it.
in the 220 and it's attached to the 2T. So don't be surprised to see that happening more and more.
Anything else on this?
We can still put it in as a seller's concession though, can't we?
You can, yeah.
Like
in
if
the
they're
two-
offering the buyer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that can still, because that's negotiable between buyer and seller.
Yeah. So that stays on the 2T. Okay.
Yes.
yeah, that's right.
Because that's nothing to do with the commission. That's the stick there. It's our commission that doesn't belong. Bonuses, referral fees, whatever you want to call it. Moving on, they still spell out when we've earned our fee versus when it's due and payable. You know, like we always say, whenever they update the forms, if it's been a while since you read 101, this is a great time to just sit down and read it. Earnest money deposit and due diligence. The seller now has, they've always said that the firm or the seller will split the earnest money deposit. If the contract is terminated, the seller will split the earnest money deposit with the firm. But now the seller has an option. Seller does or does not agree to equally split any earnest money, again, if the contract's terminated. So we're just kind of giving the seller some more options here, making that negotiable. Dual agency, again, still explains what dual agency is about, what that means for the seller to be in dual agency. It's not recommended that we expect them to read this. The suggestion is we still have the conversation about dual agency. What has changed is the layout. They now have it, well, I'll see what you guys think. So we got a couple options here. Initial, only one is applicable. So we have the choice. Firm may not act as a dual agent, or firm may act as a dual agent. So this first step here, we're getting these sellers to agree to dual agency or not. If they agree to dual, if firm may act as dual, then initial only one line below. Seller does not authorize the same agent in dual agency. Seller does authorize the same agent in dual agency, or seller directs the firm to practice designated dual agency. So they're going to initial one, dual agency or no dual agency. And then if they say yes to dual, then they're going to select one of these three options below. Thoughts on that?
Julie, isn't it saying the same thing? I mean, if he says firm may not act as a dual agency, 3 lines down, it says seller does not authorize the same agent to represent both seller and buyer. Isn't that the same thing?
Well, no, because dual agency is about the firm. So if they're authorizing dual agency, they're saying they're allowing any broker within the firm to bring their buyer client. So then what this is saying is, will they allow the same agent? Will they allow the listing agent to act as the selling agent, the same agent to be in dual?
Okay.
Some sellers are okay with, Elizabeth, you have the listing and they're okay with Jody bringing the buyer. Other sellers are, are okay with you doing both. So that's kind of allows us to have that conversation about, their preference there. Of course, we offer designated. So Jody's shaking her head. So I think I'm okay to say, I would think we'd be using that third line, because when we select designated, it's automatically 2 brokers. So
Right.
Jody's still shaking her head. So I think that third line that we authorize designated, as long as the seller agrees. And then of course we still got to get the buyer to agree as well.
Just, Elizabeth, remember that if you have a buyer agency relationship and agreement with the buyer, and then you show them one of your listings, you cannot be designated to represent one or the other, because you now have knowledge of
Mhm.
both parties. So you would be strictly a dual agent, not a designated. And at that point, you are limited to what you can advise or say to either party. So if you get into that situation, please get with Billy or me or Julie. We need to talk that through if any of you have that situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else on dual? The next section 12, I'm pretty excited about. I hope you guys are as well. This used to be a lot lengthy, and it was, and I mean, it still is, but I think it's consolidated now. I've always interpreted this section as kind of a checklist anyway, to make sure we're going through these specific items with the sellers. And while things haven't changed, as you can see, it's a lot more clear. And it kind of just gets to the bullet points. It gets straight to the point. So seller, I'm not going to go through all of it, but seller is or is not working with a relocation company. They have or have not received sample copies of the offer to purchase and the PSD, etc. They have or have not owned the property for a year. Seller affirms that it has legal access to a public right of way. There is or is not an agreement. Property does or does not have a mobile home. Again, as you can see, I mean, this was like multiple pages, and now they've greatly consolidated it. And I'll let you guys go through it. Nothing's changed. It's just how it looks. I say nothing's changed, but I have P highlighted. Yeah, just going through. P is about their outstanding liens, deed of trust, that kind of thing. So they just recommended that we don't gloss over that section, because we want to make sure, when we list it, that the seller can afford to sell. So having that conversation about their approximate balances is still as important, even though it's kind of been consolidated. This goes the whole way to W. So you have a checklist item of A through W of questions that you need to ask the seller. And I think for us, that's kind of easier to make sure that we don't miss anything and that we have these discussions as necessary. Thoughts on that? Seller's duties, again, this was long drawn out, but they just consolidated, condensed it for us. So basically, the seller's duties to us, they have to provide reasonable access, provide firm with information and documents, allow the firm to provide documents to other parties to facilitate the purchase, deliver a general warranty deed, and comply with any purchase contract. So very, very simple. The only other thing that's changed then is the wire fraud warning. It used to be in a big box, warning, red box, but then they just condensed it to keep it within 7 pages. But it's still in red, so it's still worth having the conversation. Of course, we still have our wire fraud advisory for our parties to sign off on.
Do we need to keep our wire fraud, the separate disclosure that we've got in our template, or do you feel like that this fulfills it?
I like having it there
Okay.
because it allows us to have the conversation should it get glossed over here. If
Okay.
the seller doesn't read it here, then at least it still gives us an opportunity to get it in front of them.
I agree. I don't think you can be too careful when it comes to somebody's money.
Somebody else's money.
Yeah.
And we're hearing those stories still. So additional terms, again, we were just reminded that these are things that the firm and the seller may agree to that's not a part of this agreement. One thing that they brought up, the webinar that I watched on this, one thing that they brought up is apparently sellers don't want to pay off their solar panels, the lien on their solar panels. They said the legal hotline is blowing up with my seller doesn't want to pay the lien on their solar panels. So remember, 2T says that the seller will pay him. So if the parties agree otherwise, then that's part of the negotiations. But if that's something like that we agree to, that we'll try to get the buyers to pay them, then that could be an example of something that goes into the additional terms. But solar panel liens are no different than any other liens. Sellers are responsible for paying off all outstanding liens as part of the closing process, whether they not want to or not. So that's our new 7-page exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Questions, comments?
Guys, the only thing I would tell you is please just make sure that you are taking adequate time. Put the sample listing agreement in your listing presentation so that they have an opportunity to review it. And then if you are doing all these documents electronically, as I expect we mostly are, just make sure that there are, ask questions. Do you understand everything in the listing agreement? Please do not assume that people read everything. So just make sure you're asking.
Okay. So that's the
Julie,
big form. Yeah.
I have one quick question. Did I hear correctly when you said if we have a loop that does not already have a exclusive agency agreement signed, that we are to go to the NAR website and download it?
No, you can do in dotloop, you can add it straight from templates.
From ours. That's what I thought. Okay, great.
And one of the templates is our NCAR forms.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's there as of this morning. So if you went looking for it yesterday, as I did, it wasn't there yet.
Thank
But
you.
that's just if you have an existing loop without a signed agency
Without a
agreement.
sign. Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Our buyer's agency agreement, again, hasn't had many changes because we just did this big change in October. So again, they expect that there should be no more changes until July, but I mean, no promises are made. So, if anything happens, we'll of course let you know. Before we get into the big change, I just want to point out that the dual agency section has been revamped and it now mimics the listing agreement that we just saw. So now the two are the same, whether you're talking to buyer or seller about dual agency, at least they now look the same. The big change in the buyer's agency agreement is in number 5 about our negotiable fee and additional compensation. And what they changed is this sentence: firm may not receive, etc. But before we look at that sentence, I want to go back to 201, to the original that they just updated in October, and show you it used to say if any additional compensation is offered to the firm from any other party or person and related to the services, the additional compensation exceeds what buyers agreed to pay, firm cannot be paid the additional compensation unless the buyer agrees to amend this agreement. Buyers no obligation to agree to additional compensation. What they address with this, when they changed this language, it just more closely relates the NAR settlement. And one thing that they're predicting may come from this eventually is changing our commission. So once we've agreed to it, that's it. So the new 201 now has all that's been removed. And now it just says firm may not receive compensation from the services from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to herein with the buyer. So again, just closely tracking that language of the settlement, help you better navigate that conversation, and not expecting changes, not having your buyers expect changes to compensation later. So what we tell them up front should be what's up.
I have a question
Me
about
too.
that.
I may or may not have answers.
Yeah,
Hit me.
So, I understand the statement that compensation from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to. I get that language. But as we all know, because all of this is so negotiable,
Mhm.
what if we get in a situation where the fee, that all of a sudden this comes into play? Do we do an agreement to an agency agreement renewal to change it? How do we amend that?
That's what they're trying to get away from.
I understand that, but I don't think that's real world.
I agree.
So my question.
I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't, as it works out, because
Yeah.
remember, I think for the most part, and you guys tell me, but I think for the most part, you still have the seller's pay, which is coming through 220. So as long as it's not more than what we have here, then we don't have the problem. So if I say you're going to pay me 3% and they're paying me 3% or 2.5% and 220, then we should be good. The problem is if I want 3% and a bonus or 3.5%.
Or it could be a situation in my world where a builder says, I'll pay a $5,000 bonus, and an offer comes in and we're haggling and going around and around. And he says, look, I'll give you a $7,500 bonus, but I'm not paying X. Well, now that's not what that says.
Right.
So in my world, I get what it says, but we're gonna get to a place where we'll have to amend it somehow.
I agree.
So,
And they specifically mentioned like builder's bonuses, like you're saying. I mean, when you meet this buyer, you may not know that they want new construction, that they want a builder
Yeah.
bonus.
that's right.
So
I
mean,
had a question to piggyback off of Jody. Okay, so my recent one that I just did, my recent one in my dot loop, I put the percent that I wanted, basically, that we discussed. So I got the 3% in there, so forth and so on. And then I clicked other. And in the other bracket is where I ended up putting the transaction fee. And then I put after the transaction fee, any and all bonuses related to this. Can that go in there?
the concern that they have there is that's like an open-ended agreement.
So you can't have that in there. I mean, it should cover it if it's offered.
I agree. This is where I think there's a flaw. And I hear what you guys are saying, but I'm just telling you what they're saying, and what they're saying is when we meet with a buyer, we should have our commission agreed upon, and we shouldn't have these amendments.
So here's what I'm gonna tell you you need to do in this situation, and I'm comfortable with this. If you put in there the $350 transaction fee, any bonuses, will be addressed in a separate email or in a separate, agreement or something like that. I'm comfortable with us right now today, as long as the buyer understands that the bonus, for instance, has changed, or that there is now a bonus, and everybody signs off on that, or we have an email in agreement to that, I will go to bat for you. So
Okay.
I would rather you put in there, any additional bonuses to be discussed at the time of contract.
Mhm.
I'd rather
Okay.
you put language in there under specific amount.
Okay, yeah, and then like I said, then you would go back to the 220 form anyway, where it would state what you're getting. And then if there is a bonus from a seller, it's in the 220 form, and this buyer has to sign off on that anyway.
The
So
buyer's
it's
not
not like
right.
it's not being shown, but
Right.
you don't have to go back and amend this document.
Yeah.
And that's
right.
exactly what they're trying to avoid is I'll charge you to, and it's, and I think the bonuses are builder bonuses are an unfortunate consequence to this because they're trying to avoid buyer's agents saying, I'll charge you 2%. And then, oh, I need to charge you 2.5. What they're trying to get at is what I tell you up front is what I'm going to stick to. So that's where I think they're going to have to figure out that verbiage piece with those builder bonuses, for example.
I think they're just trying to tell me what I can do and can't do. But I will tell you at this point, you, as long as you put it in the 220 and the language you put in this agreement says any and all bonuses to be discussed at time of contract, then I will support you guys.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
I'm making a note, guys. Sorry. I don't know if you
Yeah.
can see me. I can't see you guys. This is weird not being able to see you.
So Julie, one quick thing. The only thing about that, for those of us that sell,
What was that? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Julie. So one other thing about that, for those of us that sell foreclosures and short sales, we know that that commission sometimes can come down. So we still need to change it in that form too, correct? For instance, one bank I know will not pay more than 4% or, for the sale of the property. Well, there's a certain amount that they cap on. So if we had put in there, if I'm working with a buyer and I had put the 3% or 2.5%, then I need to go back and change it to go down, correct?
I think less than is okay. The
Okay.
problem is when it's more than what
More
we
than,
agree.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. So if we say 3 and they say, no, we're just going to do half, that's, I think that's okay.
okay.
But what they're trying to make sure is that I guess they're trying to make sure we disclose like the max, to the buyers.
Gotcha.
Okay. Anything else? All right. One more. 202, the property showing agreement. They added under services provided, before we could charge, we talk about all we're doing with this form is pretty much permission to walk in the door, permission to show the property. It has always said that if this is not an exclusive agency agreement, the buyer may hire another, If buyer decides to make an offer on the property, firm may require buyer to sign another agency agreement. So we said this from the beginning when this form rolled out. You're only using this if you don't have a signed buyer's agency agreement to show the property. This gets you in the door. What they've added is that if buyer does make an offer with the firm's assistance, firm expects to be paid. And again, we're going to put our commission in. So we're just disclosing up front. We had the big conversation down here about fee for showing services. If you're going to charge, X amount or whatever to show the property, there's that fee. But what it didn't have before is the fact that we expect to get a commission if you're going to make an offer and move forward. So it just kind of has that conversation that we expect to get paid before we get to the written agency agreement. Questions on that? I think I said the last one, that was kind of a fib. Real quick, the non-exclusive buyer agency agreement. I don't know if any of you are using this or not. Dual agency has been revamped, so now it mirrors 201 and 101. But then the other thing they did too is address payment of fees. So buyer will or will not be responsible for paying the firm's fee. So it's buyer's agency agreement. It's just non-exclusive. We don't have this in the templates. I think ultimately we decided we prefer you to use 101, the exclusive buyer agency agreement. But if you have a need for this form, it just addresses the payment of the fee. So again, it's all about the commission. It's all about us disclosing that commission up front. And I'm going to stop sharing now so we can see you guys again. Maybe. There you are. Hey guys, I've missed you.
Hey,
So what do
Jules.
So what do you think? Was that, I mean, nothing major. Again, all just reflecting, most of it reflecting the NAR thing. A lot of consolidation. I like that it's 7 pages now and not 13, you know, and a lot of that was just taking out some of that extra words. Remember, anything like if you're working with an estate, anything like that can be found in the guidelines. So please make sure you're referring to that guidelines, especially as we're going through all these changes.
Very good. Very good.
Is that it?
Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you,
I'm
Julie.
recording, so once I get it loaded, I'll send everybody the link. For those that couldn't be here, watch it if you want to go back and review anything. And like Jody said, you always got me, her, Billy to come to with questions, and we'll figure it out.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
Thanks.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
afternoon. Bye.
Bye.